I'm going to talk to you about how to solve life's problems. Any problem, right? I'm Trevor Emdon. I'm an international success coach. And here's a question that's vexed me for a long time. Suppose that you were Henry Ford and everyone, like your advisors, your colleagues, your friends, your financial backers, and even your wife was telling you nobody will want a mass produced motor car. A, it's not possible to do it, and B, there's no market for it. Now imagine the problems that that man had in terms of how we look at a problem, right? First of all, everyone, like the engineers that he was working with and employed, said, Henry, this cannot be done. It's not actually possible. Imagine that. And then his wife says, Henry, don't be ridiculous. Don't waste your money. I mean, everyone told him it was not possible and that there was no market. Now, I can only put my hand on my heart here and say, if that had been me, I think I would have backed down. I honestly think that I would, right? Walt Disney, he's another one, right? He was told that there was no market for a full-length animated movie, and yet he went ahead. Oh, even his own animators told him that this was a waste of time making Snow White. Can you imagine, right? And when Disney World opened, Walt had actually passed away by the time it got to the opening. And you may know the story that his brother Roy was, stood in his place at the grand opening, and a journalist, as I've heard the story, asked Roy Disney, "How do you imagine, Walt would have felt if he'd seen this? Isn't it a shame Walt never saw this?" Something like that. And Roy said, "Sir, Walt saw every inch of this, otherwise we wouldn't be standing here." Now, what interests me about people like this, Oprah Winfrey, she's another one, right? She, at some point in her teenage years, she was written off by a judge as a juvenile delinquent who, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's documented somewhere, who said that she would probably not make it to the age of 20 and spend her remaining few years, in locked up as a delinquent. Oprah Winfrey, right? One of the greatest influences of our time and probably one of the most influential women of all time. And what really interests me about people like them, and there are lots of stories like that, there are two things that interest me. One is, what do they do in their heads? And the other is that there are a lot of stories like that. I've picked deliberately 3 world famous people because I don't know who you are and where you might be watching this from, and if you've not heard of Henry Ford, Walt Disney, or Oprah Winfrey, then you're probably living under a rock, right? But there are thousands of stories like that. Some less world important, I suppose, but stories of people who have a dream and no matter what, see it through and make it become reality. Now, what intrigues me about that is, what are they doing inside their own head that makes that possible? Because they're all very different people from different eras, different walks of life, and so on, different education, different backgrounds. I mean, you can't really compare them, except that they all did something inside their heads. Now, we may not be able to reverse engineer that. I mean, Oprah's the only one still with us that we could even possibly ask. But even she, if we did ask her, I'm sure she would shed some light. She'd give us some insight about, well, remembering that time in her life when she was becoming the Oprah that we know today, given the early start that she'd had in life. She might do. But what's really interesting is that we actually don't need to know. If you want to solve all of life's problems and make your dreams come true, all you have to do is change your thinking. Now, there is a big caveat about this, because, and if you know me, if you've watched my videos or followed me, my blogs or anything before, you know that I come from a background of psychotherapy. I'm trained in something called NLP, and I'm not going to tell you about that today, because there's a big flaw that I only recently came across with all of those therapies and the positive thought movement and all of that stuff. You can have positive thoughts, but I absolutely know now that you cannot say with any degree of certainty, I will only think positive from now on. Because you can't. Because although you can choose to ignore, let's put it that way, negative thoughts or thoughts that you don't want, you can dismiss them, you can ignore them, you can just say, I'm not playing that game. But what you can't do is you can't stop them coming into your head. You can kind of influence what comes in. I think that over time you can kind of train your mind a bit, but you can't actually say, because you don't know what you're going to be thinking a minute from now, or 10 minutes from now, or this time tomorrow, or this time next week, next month, next year, or 10 years. We can't say in advance, I'm going to only think positive thoughts, because you don't know. Right? And so I like to, sometimes this metaphor won't work perfectly, but if you think of your mind like a TV set, right? So when you switch on your TV, all the channels that you have access to are available like in the air all the time. It's only when you switch on the TV and you then select, however you do, I'm miming a remote control now, but whatever you use, because now you can speak to the things, whatever you use to select your TV channel, so you can say, I'm only going to watch comedies. You can do that, but what you can't do is stop all the other channels being available. Even if you say, well, I'm only going to pay for the ones I really like, you still don't have any control over what the broadcasters choose to show on those channels. So there is some, the analogy begins to break down about here, but there is some mileage in that metaphor. I hope you can see. Now, the other thing about that metaphor, analogy, I don't know. I think there is a slight difference in those words, but anyway, the other thing about them is that a television is a good metaphor, because you can watch a drama on TV or a movie or whatever, and you can be engrossed in it. You can be really you can laugh, you can cry, you can, if the characters are in danger, you can, I hope they're all right. If it's a cliffhanger and you have to tune in tomorrow or next week or whatever it is, I can't wait to find out what happens. All of those things feel really real to you. You laugh and cry and have real emotion over something that at the same time is a fiction, and that you're not personally involved or personally in danger. There's a man in front of you right there with a gun, but he's on a TV screen. So even if he's pointing it directly at the camera, you're not in danger, because it's a movie or a drama on TV. Can't hurt you. So you can still kind of, eat your popcorn or whatever it is you do on your sofa, no matter what happens, even though you can still feel the adrenaline, you can have the reactions, everything, the tension, they can build it. Brilliant. But we still know that we're safe. Now, you can do that with your thoughts. You can detach from them. And I imagine that the likes of Henry Ford and Walt Disney and Oprah Winfrey and many, many others like them somehow knew that they could do that. I'll tell you another one whose story is very, very famous, but probably not in the same, well, very important story, and that was Viktor Frankl, who, if you've heard of Viktor Frankl, you probably have. He was a prisoner of war in Auschwitz, and he survived, obviously, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, right, which is still available. It's a bestseller, been around for a long time, and he survived. He was a psychiatrist, I think, but he survived by realizing, essentially, that he didn't have to listen to his fearful thoughts. I mean, he still had a terrible time, but he understood. He didn't use this language. He called it logotherapy. What came out of that for him. But essentially, the message of that book, and I have read it. It's quite hard to read. It's not very long, but it of course, because of its subject matter, it is quite hard to read. But he understood, he learned and understood that if he stepped back from his thoughts, that he didn't have to suffer inside. He still suffered externally. He was beaten and starved and, as you can imagine, terrible things. And I don't know, I can't remember now why he avoided the gas chambers, but he did, obviously. And he went on and became, into his late life, he was quite a celebrity, and I think there are probably interviews with Viktor Frankl you may even find on YouTube. So it's about that. Somehow, the people who break through, whether it's breaking through obstacles and challenges to build and create dreams, or whether it's just dissolving problems, use their minds in that way. Now, I don't know when you're going to watch this. I hope that's been helpful, but I have one more thing to offer you, which is that I'm doing a whole workshop on this. Now, as I record this, it's a few days into the future, obviously, and it's going to be on June 1st, 2019. That's a Sunday. Now, if it's beyond that date when you see this, you can still click the link. There'll be a link, if you're watching on YouTube, there'll be a link below this video, and see if it's still available, or if it's available in some other format. I haven't yet decided what I'll do post the workshop. But if you would like to be part of it, it's going to be a half-day workshop, live, with actually interactive. If you want to be part of that, if you're available on Sunday, June the 1st, for about 4 hours, I'll be very happy to see you there. Although there's a limited number of places, so you will need to get to act fairly quickly. If it's post that date, the link may just take you to a page that says sorry, it's closed. But it may be that we're either going to do a repeat, or maybe that you're able to get hold of those recordings. I don't know in advance what I'm going to do after June the 1st with that material. So there you go. Just telling you. Right. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I hope that's given you a little tweak. But that's why NLP and all that positive thinking stuff doesn't work, because you can't make yourself do it. And when you try and do it by willpower, say, I must think positive thoughts, all you're doing is just reminding yourself that there's negativity around. It's the detaching that makes it possible to move in your direction. That's why we have mass-produced motor cars. I know they've created problems of their own, but Henry Ford changed the world because he believed in his dream. So did Disney, so did Oprah, and so did Viktor Frankl, and a whole host of other people, and maybe you. So please join me on my workshop if you're in time. Link is below. Hope this has been helpful in any case. See you next time.